In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys why it is dang near impossible to drive the finish line. Just kidding. But I bet a lot of you guys feel like it's impossible, and in no way am I an expert myself, but in this one I want to share with you guys my thoughts, my ideas, maybe you can play around with or expand on in your own racing, and let you guys know what I think the top bracket racers are currently having the most success with at the finish line. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about a few of the major ways you can drive the finish line. You can dial honest, which I really wouldn't recommend. In my top 10 bracket racing tips video, I dove pretty deep into the fact that there's a lot of different ways that you're susceptible to losing if you dial honest. The first way I want to get into is this idea of holding a certain amount. So let's just call it X. Maybe you're holding 2 and you don't look at your opponent, and what you're trying to do is do what you think you need to do to put it dead on without looking at him. I think it'd be a perfect strategy for a beginner or to somebody who's newer at holding numbers. Why is that? Well, what makes finish line driving start to get difficult is when you start involving your opponent into what you're doing. So you're looking over, you're trying to react, you're trying to make decisions based on what they're doing in just a few seconds, and you start to make mistakes. But if you ain't looking at them, you can't make those mistakes. But at the same time, you'll still be learning how to hold, how to kill different amounts of ET. You'd still be changing the look of the race, making it harder on your opponent, and I really don't think they would expect it. My second finish line strategy, which is actually not so different from the first, you're holding, you're looking at your opponent this time, but you really don't care where they're at. You're of course trying to put the car dead on, but the only reason you're looking at them is to see if there's anything more you can do. What do I mean by that? Well, I was actually doing this at the OG Million. So let's look at this one round here where I'm holding 3, going down through there, start working on killing my 3. You can see he's going around me. I knew I would end up behind, but I stuck with the plan. I killed my 3 and I ended up behind. That's all I'm going to say about this one. Let's compare it to my next round. Same game plan, holding about 3. We go down through there, kill my 3, except this time my opponent is not going around me. This time I have some room, and it looks like I'm going to get there by a decent amount. Was able to give it 2 extra rips to put it almost 2 over the dial in and make sure the wind light came on. So again, with this one, you're holding a certain amount. You have a set plan, a set way to kill that amount. You execute it, but you're looking for any opportunities to kill even more ET to increase your chance that the wind light comes on. The third method, and the most advanced of the 3, is when you're holding, looking at your opponent, and you're driving completely off of their position. To pull this off, you need to have a really good understanding of how much ET you're killing with every single thing that you're doing. You need to know if you give it a rip of the throttle right here, it's going to kill this much. If you hit the brakes right here, it's going to kill this much. For example, let's say you're holding about 4, catching up to somebody, you give it a rip, you know you killed about 2 with that rip. There's not enough room to kill your other 2. Go down there and hit the brakes to kill your other 2. If you compare this to the previous method where you don't really care where they're at, this one can be a lot more vulnerable, a lot more prone to mistakes, but I would say it favors more aggressive drivers. And the advantage of this is that you're almost always there. You're almost always right with them if you want to be. Decisions are more in your hand to make. You can decide if you want to get there first or not most of the time, and almost guaranteed to be right on them no matter what. Can cause a lot of mistakes out of your opponent. So which way's best? I'm not sure there's a right answer to that. You always need to be trying to put the car dead on the dial. That was consistent with all 3 of those methods. The main difference though was the style in which you do it. So are you not really caring where your opponent's at, or are you driving completely off their position? Hope you guys like this little whiteboard. Let's talk about negative package. Again, I did touch on this in my top 10 bracket racing tips video. Only got 2 variables to work with here, the light and the amount that you're holding, or the expected light, the light that you want to have. I believe the example I used was you're trying to be 7 or 10 on the tree and you came up 13, so something realistic, and you're holding 200s. So if you add these 2 together, you are successfully going down the track with a negative 7 thousandths package. Why is this good? Well, your opponent could be 000 on the tree, taking 000 at the finish line, all right, doing the best job they could possibly be doing. But since your total package is negative 7 thousandths, if they are right with you, which they would be, taking 000, they are 100% of the time about to break out by 7 thousandths. Something to keep in mind though, in this scenario, you are still holding 200s. So at some point in the race, you have to kill that 200s to go over your dial. So whether that be brakes really late, a couple rips of the throttle, whatever you know how to do to kill that 200s. And yeah, yeah, it's just a solid method. I encourage you to go play around with the numbers a little bit, but essentially you're making it impossible for your opponent to wheel you through, kind of forcing them to know what their car's running, know where dead on is for them. And keep in mind, this is a plan that you set up before you even go down the track. You're in control of your dial. You can dial up as much as you want. Make sure your light's covered, and it's going to be really tough on your opponent. Something this is reminding me of, though, is the time that Motor Mania actually came to Extreme, one of my home tracks, for I believe it was the 6-shooter showdown. And I remember watching, I went through all the time runs, wrote down what they ran, and then I went through all of first round and wrote down what they dialed. Something I discovered was all but like 5 of them dialed either honest or to the high side of a number. So if they ran in the time run like a 654 with a 7, they dialed a 655. So just up to the next number. So all those people that are dialed like that are not effectively using the negative package rule. And why is that? Well, if you're dialed honest, you can never use this rule because you're in the pluses already on the holding side. It's never gonna you can't be, if you're 000 and you're dialed honest to go like dead 5, you're plus 5 thousandths already. Like, you can't go negative. That example I gave, they were holding like 3 thou, right? I said they ran a 654 with a 7, and I said they came back and dialed a 655. So they're holding 3 thou, right? So now they got to be 3 or better on the tree, otherwise they're not in the negatives. So if they're 004 on the tree, they're still amazing. They're going to be going down the track, the difference here, plus a thou, right? They got to be better than 3 to cover it. So all those people dialing them like that, when they miss the tree a little bit, they're 15, they're 20, and they're not holding very much, it's probably not looking very good. So I was trying to figure out why most people are doing this. Why aren't people holding more? And maybe they think it doesn't work. I want to show you guys this list here. Ryan Gleghorn made it. It's a point system based off big money bracket races for wins and runner-ups. So I think it's 1 point per $1,000 win up until 50. So let's say you want a 30 grander, you get 30 points. If you want a 50 grander, you get 50. If you want a 60 grander, you'd still get 50. And runner-ups count for points too. So here you got the people who've earned the most points. So I'll go through them. I'll give my opinion just based off of watching them of how much I think they hold typically. So you got Jeff Serra, I would say mostly like 4 to 8. Kyle Coltrera, that one's tougher. I'm not even sure. Maybe like 2 to 3. Champ, I'm going to say like right at 4. I believe Datus is probably like 4 to 5. Nick Hastings, I'm really not sure to be honest, but I know he uses nitrous. Kevin Brannon, I would say maybe on the lower side, but still maybe like around 2 to 3. Will Holloman, I'd say lower side, maybe 1 to 2. Donovan Williams, probably like 4, 5, 6. Troy, I'd say is about 3. Not sure at all about Doug Foley, maybe like 2 at least. Corey, I feel like it could range. I would say mostly 2 to 3, but maybe like 2 to 5. And Johnny right around 4 to 5. So if people think that holding more doesn't work, I would just argue against it just based off this list alone. I don't think I said a single person that was less than 1. Lots of guys that hold quite a bit here and clearly are very successful with it. So I would say that holding a lot definitely works. Why else would a lot of people not be holding more? Another reason I can think is maybe they're scared. So let's compare finish line driving to hitting the tree. With hitting the tree, you react to the light, either your hand comes off the button or you swap feet and it's over in an instant. You either missed it or you hit it. With finish line driving though, you got a lot more time to work with. You got the entire track to think about what you want to do, and it's an opportunity for you to make up for any mistakes on the tree. So don't be scared to hold more. Only other reason I could think that people might not want to hold more is they might think it's too difficult. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about my racing from the OG Million again. I really pretty much had just discovered how to kill 3 to 3.5 pretty consistently in the time runs leading up to that. But it was crazy. Like round after round, I'd dial 3 up, go down there, try to kill 3, and I'd look up at the scoreboard. It'd be like dead on or like low dead on, and I'd just be like, now guys, hear me out. I'm not 100% sure on this, on the physics behind this, but I may have discovered something. I'm thinking it might be easier to put the car dead on when you're holding more. The reason I'm thinking this is because when you think about your dial-in, when you're dialing more honest or you're only holding like 1 or less than 1, you are going into the rounds and you're trying to calculate what your car's going to run. If you're honest, you got to get the dial-in right the entire track, right? when you're doing what I was doing, I was starting to get out of the gas just after half track. So all I was having to do is correctly predict the car's ET to half track. So a whole half track less. You know from doing it, cars don't vary as much to half track. I'd often watch people on Motor Mania holding the lot, putting it dead on or low dead on, and I'm like, dang, how are they doing that? But after doing it myself, I think there's something to it. I'm typically more of a numbers guy. I'll sit there for a long time, figuring out what I think the car's gonna run, like pretty much to the thousandth. But when I was racing like that, I almost just kind of stopped doing that because I was like, I think it's gonna go about this number to half track, and I'm gonna kill my 3, and it's gonna end up dead on. So if you're thinking it's too difficult to hold more, it seriously may actually be easier. What is something you could try to do for the first time? One thing I'd recommend giving a try is stopping at the mile-an-hour cone or parking it at the mile-an-hour cone. Others might call it a spot drop, which in this case the spot would be the mile-per-hour cone. There's a few reasons I think this is a good strategy. Number one, you need to be precise in killing the same amount every time, and to do that you're going to need a good reference point, and there's really no better reference point than the mile-per-hour cone just right before the finish line. Number two, the math works out pretty well with it. It's pretty easy to calculate. All you'd want to do is say during a test and tune run, a time run, a red light, go down there, hit the brakes just like a normal brake press, just like you're stopping after the finish line. Try to calculate what you were going based on your 60-foot and 330 intervals if you had held the gas the entire way. Take what you would have gone, compare it to what you did go, hitting the brakes. That's how much it killed. Let's say it killed 200, so you're going in the first round. You think your car's going to go a 574 with a 3, put a 576 on it, and do that same play. Numbers aren't too crazy to calculate. It normally covers your light as long as you don't completely miss the tree. It's also good because it's just really hard to deal with. You're hitting the brakes so late into the run. Even if your opponent knows it's coming, it's tough for them to do anything about it. And even very experienced racers, I would definitely recommend that you have this one in your arsenal. Real quick, I want to go back to reference points, especially when you're deciding, okay, I want to try something for the first time, or when you are trying to replicate that same thing over and over and over. You're going to need a good reference point. Now, what me and my dad will do is at nighttime, we'll go to the track, we'll get some spray paint, and we'll just start marking up the walls. But if you guys don't want to do that, then you're going to need something on the track or some sort of way for you to remember where things are. So again, I would start all around the mile-per-hour cone. There's a lot of different stuff you can do around the mile-per-hour cone. That's kind of where I started. For me, one rip of the throttle around the mile-an-hour cone is about 100. About halfway between the mile-per-hour cone and the finish line is only a few thou, 3-4 thou maybe. At the OG Million, I was waiting until my back tires were at the mile-an-hour cone, so maybe my front tires were about here. Take a first rip, first one, and then second one about halfway between where that first one was and the finish line, so somewhere around here. That would kill about 3 to 3.5. For brakes, if I just give it a normal brake press like I would after the finish line at about the mile-an-hour cone, it's about 2. And if I got on them really hard right here, probably about 3. So I'd recommend just playing around with it, visualize it, whether it's something like this that you draw or you're at the track and you're just kind of looking at the track. Maybe you have a favorite racer and you like the fact that they give a big rip every time at this certain spot. You want to kind of do something similar, but make sure you don't forget. Everything's going to be unique to you and your car, the way you get out of the gas, the way you get on the brake. So make sure you write it down, make sure you remember. I'm sure there's a million different variations, so just do what looks enjoyable to you. Last thing I want to talk about in this video, what to look at when you're driving the finish. Specifically, looking at wheels versus the 90-degree method. Looking at wheels, pretty self-explanatory. You just look at their wheels. 90-degree method, that's when you turn your head 90 degrees at your opponent, line up a spot just in front of their car. That's typically done by most people when you're both pre-staged. Pro of looking at wheels is that you're going to have a lot better view of the finish line in most cases. You're not going to have to be turning your head as far to see your opponent's wheels and then back to the finish line. Whereas 90, you got to look with your head all the way over to the side and then back to the finish line. So if you want to do 90, you got to have a really good feel for where the finish line is without looking at it. Pro of the 90, in my opinion, is going to be just being able to tell if you're in front or not. You got that really good reference point that you drew either when you were pre-staged. As long as you can turn your head exactly 90 degrees to the right and look straight across, you should be able to know that you're just in front. Whereas with the wheels, you need to have a really good feel of where your wheels are compared to your opponent's without having that straight line. It's more of a triangle. Let's take another look at this list of the top points earners at big money races. So at the top, I know Jeff Serra uses the 90-degree method. Kyle Cotrera uses the 90-degree method as well. Champ, I'm pretty sure his wheels, I'm thinking Matt Daddis might be 90. Kevin Brannon, not 100% either. Thinking Will Holloman, Donovan, and Troy are probably wheels. Corey's wheels. Johnny's always been wheels, but I might have seen him given the 90-degree method a shot the last time I saw him on Motor Mania. The 90-degree method is a newer method. Maybe it was used in the past, but definitely not near as much as it's being used today. And you already see two guys that are at the top using it, so I might have to give the edge to 90-degree right now. It's definitely strong, at least. Something I will say though is I think the 90-degree method is better suited to those who hold more, those who hold a lot. I'd say the best examples of this are Jeff Serra and Slate Cummings. When you hold that much, you really catch them early, and when you combine that with the 90-degree method, you're able to put yourself just right in front of them and wheel them through all the way through the finish line. From using the 90 myself, I'd say it's a little bit tougher whenever you and your opponent's ET gap is a little bit bigger. So let's say your dragster, 450 dial, taking on a 650 door car. Do you really want to be turning your head completely sideways as you're catching them, trying to line that up, going like 40-50 mile an hour faster, or vice versa for door car drivers? Just something to keep in mind. I really do think this is all personal preference, and you should pick one and stick with it. But that's really going to do it for this one. Just wanted to talk a little bit about finish line driving, just whatever I thought of. Didn't know exactly where I was going to go with it, but I did know I wanted to try to challenge you guys to step outside your comfort zone a little bit when it comes to holding numbers and finish line driving. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, consider subscribing. All you got to do is push the button. It's completely free. And if you got absolutely nothing out of this video, listen closely to my new outro. It's something that my mom used to always tell me, and it goes like this. Actually, she still tells me this. Don't take too much stripe, and if you ain't getting there, cut 'em loose.